Why to celebrate National Voter Registration Day? The biggest factor is 1 in 4 eligible Americans are not registered to vote, and that millions of Americans miss the election each year due to registration problems or missing deadlines. That's why we're here, because on September 19th, everyone has an opportunity to register. And some of those people who may have missed, will maybe miss it down the line, will have an opportunity to meet different individuals from both their community and their circles and help them to understand the importance of registering to vote and participating. Also, it's a unique day because you, as a trusted and unique person in your community, will have the opportunity to be a pillar of your community by informing, educating, and inspiring your family and friends to participate in voting. Something bigger, right? We support hundreds of thousands of voters nationwide. So it's not limited to just one community or one demographic or even one political party. We're open to everyone, right? So we are building an umbrella that can cover everyone in the shade. You get an opportunity to update their registration and register first-time voters. That's a unique and beautiful opportunity. You'll learn more about upcoming elections. How can you, as a person in your community, become more informed and share that information so that people are more informed on how they can participate, and also to maybe tamper down some of the disinformation that occurs or misinformation. And you become a part of celebrating a civic holiday. You get to be a part of not just one holiday, but many, right? So we also participate with other partners, but you're at the forefront of that partnership and a part of that community. And we join with thousands of community partners. So this year in particular, we're looking for up to 4,000 or even more partners to participate. So you're not just one individual on your own, you're a part of a collective, which is beautiful. And we are also endorsed by the National Association of Secretaries of State, also known as NAS, and elected officials across the country. One of the beauties of National Voter Registration Day is our 2 honorary chairs are both Democratic and Republican. So it's an opportunity for us to speak to all Americans because we are representative of all Americans. Next, I'd like to share some of the big goals we have for 2023. First and foremost, we're looking to register 300,000 people. So in an off year, and I throw quotations on that because there's nothing off about this year. Instead of it being a federal election, it is a very local election, which is probably more empowering to you because these are the people who make decisions that are very close to home. And registering 300,000 people gives us the opportunity to expand that fold. Also, we engage with more than 4,000 community partners just like you. So we will work with not only college campuses and college organizations, but we will work with local food pantries or even specific cultural communities that are underrepresented. So we are always open to expanding the reach of how we can support people. And last but never least, this is an opportunity for people to get ready for local and state elections. I always love this opportunity because in a year like this, you get to plant a seed that can grow for next year. So people who will, it's known that the percentage of people who vote in the off season or in the off cycle are more likely to participate in the big elections during the midterm and the general election. So this is a great opportunity to start to sow those seeds for people so that they can know what's going on in their community and also be inspired to participate next year. So making an impact. The beauty of us is every registration matters, not just first-time voters, but people who change their address or even move communities and want to change their registration. We open our doors to everyone. National voter registration since 2012 has registered over 5 million people. So it's a great opportunity for you to be a part of that large number of people who are participating in the election process and participating in your community, and we appreciate it. Here is a list of some of our partners. So you can see that we have our corporate partners as big as Google or Aflac, but we have very local community organizations or community-centered ones like the Walter Coulter Foundation, which is very specific. So the beauty is we are not just limited to just large corporate partners. We have space for local community organizations or even an individual who's willing to move the community forward by being a representative themselves. So let me share what the expectations are of becoming a community partner, because many of you today may say, I don't know how I can participate. So let me give you some strategies and some techniques on doing that. First and foremost, we are nonpartisan. So we are not limiting ourselves to which political party you'd like to be a part of. We are open to everyone. And that this is a unique opportunity where you may get to speak to people who have a different philosophy, but you're giving them something that will still empower them. Next, we're inclusive, that there is no one that's not allowed in this fold, right? As us as Americans, we are all individually and collectively responsible for the improvement of this country. And that the more people that we have participating in the process, the better our process will be. So we are always pushing for people to add new people to this fold, right? And connect with communities that are disconnected, even more so connect with people who may not want to be a part, but don't see a space for themselves. Create the space for them. Awareness of your state voter registration laws. Every state has its own individual laws. So you can have a state like Texas where you need to be deputized, and you can have a state like Maryland where you can register online. You become one of the most informed people in your community, so you can speak to the issues of your community. You almost become the news source for a lot of people, because you may be the central piece where they get real information about their community registration laws and how they can participate. Next, it's non-transactional. It is not a you do for me, I do for you. The goal of us is to get more people involved. So we are always open to, how do we get more people to register? You do not need to solicit them. You do not need to sell them. Very much so. All you need to do is inform them and share the resources that we share with our community members. And last but never least, make it fun. It is best for us to always make this a fun and healthy event for everyone, because you're inspiring people, and people are more inspired when they're having fun doing it. So we've had partners who have had pizza parties, and we've also had partners that are out here just beating the pavement in front of a church, in front of a grocery store, talking to everyone that goes in. There is a room for everyone, and you can create what's the best technique for you. So how to have a successful event? First and foremost, you got to build a team. Right? So you can start with a team of people who are of like mind, or you can be like many of the great community members we had, and you start to grow your fold, right? So you may find someone who's just as inspired as you, or someone who just believes in you as a person. Pull them in, support them, bring them in, educate them, and give them space to be a part of your team. Next, learn the rules of your state. As a register, you get the opportunity to really inform everyone. So the more people you inform, the better they are as a resource. What we found is that not only does that information travel far, but it travels wide when you are when you're sharing information that people can take with them and also do additional research on their own. And then choose your approach. Well, what works best for you? What inspires you? Because what inspires you will inspire others. So do something that you believe in and communicate with people in a way that's best for you. It can be something as a community event. You may have a large social media presence. We have social media tools and kits that you can use to push your platform. So you can now become a community member that pushes voter registration onto the greater community, and also gives you the opportunity to expand your reach. Last but never least, gather the materials. We have a plethora of materials for you to share with you that you can use as a resource to not only gain your knowledge, but you can also use those to share with others. So you don't have to reinvent the wheel. All you have to do is just get on and ride. So next, here are the resources. So remember I said at the very beginning, have your phone ready? Here's the moment. Take your phone out, that QR code on the right-hand side of the screen, scan it. That gives you access to our community partners registration form. This is the moment where you get to choose how you want to participate. You can read over our materials. You can sign up for our webinars. There is a place for you. And here are some of the resources you capture by just being a community partner. First, you have access to free posters and stickers. We're sending out posters and stickers every day. So once you sign up, you'll receive a box of materials that you can share on your own, so you don't even have to create them. Next, you'll receive strategy guides and toolkits. This will give you the tools to catch you up, because you may sit here today and say, I don't know what to do. Let us help you. We are here to help you. Next, sample press release emails, social media copies, and more. So we will help you to curtail your messaging and the way in which you communicate on whatever social media platform you use. There is room for every social media platform to be used. So I don't want you to say, well, I'm only on Facebook. There's room for you to speak to the Facebook community and use our imaging also, as well as if you're on something as new as Threads. Also, there's a library of ready-made digital material and content. So you can use our imaging, use some of our former, you can use this webinar. Once we post it, take it and put it on your website and get more people under the fold of National Voter Registration Day. And last but never least, days like today. This is the beginning of our webinar trainings that we'll host from here until post NVRD. So you'll have multiple opportunities to learn more about the work that we're doing, learn more about partners that we're working with, and ways in which you can fit into this. There's space for everyone. I hope that while I was talking, many of you have scanned that QR code and have signed up to be a community partner today. So with that said, I want to introduce our first presenter today. And let me say that is a phenomenal member of our community. Ms. Monica Wiley is a voter engagement specialist for the National Disability Rights Network. She's helped to develop nonpartisan campaign messaging that directly engages people with disabilities and increase voter participation. Monica has more than 15 years of experience as a disability advisor in organizational and relationship management within the public and private sector, working with state government and federal organizations, including the White House, on protecting and advancing the rights of people with disabilities and underrepresented communities. With that said, I'd like everyone to welcome Ms. Monica Wiley.
Well, thank you so much for that warm introduction, Alan, and thank you for giving a great overview of what National Voter Registration Day looks like and the partners and everything that we can do here to continue to expand our partnership and supporting NVRD and everything that everyone else can do to support the work that we're doing to make sure that everyone has the opportunity to vote and has access to voting. Again, as Alan said, I am Monica Wiley. I serve as the voter engagement specialist here at the National Disability Rights Network. I have experience in the public and private sector working on voting initiatives. I was one of the individuals that was responsible for curbside voting in the Commonwealth of Virginia. Very proud of that work and to share in the great work that myself and what I call other foot soldiers in the disability army, troublemakers, but good troublemakers, that we have done some great work there in Virginia. I am now in the great state of Maryland and delighted to bring that work over to Maryland to make sure that we have curbside voting for people with disabilities, which leads to what my presentation is about. And so as you see here on the screen, it is about accessibility guide for people with disabilities, how to maximize and implement accessibility best practices for a National Voter Registration Day event. Now, before I begin, I will tell you that you can get so caught up in so much information pertaining to accessibility, because there's a lot of accessibility work that needs to be done for people with disabilities as we continue to amplify and elevate the vote and voice of people with disabilities. And when I was creating my slides, I got so deep into everything that I was doing that I wanted to present that it took me a while to scale back some of the information, because I want to make sure that you guys have the basic best practices that is needed for your NVRD event. And before I start with my presentation, I want to share with you, I am a person with a physical disability. It was caused by a drunk driver that killed my entire family at the age of 9. And so this work is very important to me for a myriad of reasons. But as an individual that was at 9 years old, was a person with a disability, didn't think or even imagine becoming disabled. Now being in the cross disability community, it is very important to me to make sure that everyone has access and that everyone has the right to exercise their voice at the voting ballot. And so having said that, let's go ahead and get started with the presentation. So voters with disabilities, the U.S. Election Assistance Commission estimates that voters with disabilities represent roughly 1/6 of the American electorate. Voters with disabilities is a growing demographic that encompasses those with mobility, visual, communicative, physical or cognitive challenges. As I shared with you, I became disabled at the age of 9. The reason why our community is a growing demographic is because it could happen to anyone at any given time. And I also want to include parents and women that become temporary disabled because of their pregnancy. That was one of the reasons for why we wanted to make sure that curbside voting and that voting was accessible, because it needs to include parents, it needs to include women that are pregnant, because they do develop temporary disability. So they are a part of the demographic, may not be long-term, but they are a part of this growing demographic. And so that's why this demographic is growing, and that's why it's so diverse. And that's why it's so important that we make sure we implement some accessibility best practices at our event. So accessibility best practices. Below are some tips that you should consider for your National Voter Registration Day event. First is establish an accessibility coordinator. Establishing this coordinator is very important because this designee will be responsible for overseeing and managing all phases of the event pertaining to voters with disabilities. And so the first thing you want to do that a accessibility coordinator would be responsible for is that person be a part of the site selection. So when you are looking at the site and where you want to host your event, you should make sure you already have identified an accessibility coordinator, because that individual will be the voice with the rest of the individuals that are responsible for identifying and selecting this site for individuals with disabilities to be able to come and participate and vote. So always make sure that your accessibility coordinator is a part of the site selection. During the site selection, you should look for the following things. Always make sure at your event that you have signage. Signage is very, very, very important, because when you think about, again, curbside voting for individuals that will be voting from their vehicle or whatever method of transportation or apparatus that they are using, you want to make sure that they know exactly where to go, which will be where the curb cuts are, where the accessibility parking is located, which should be right there at the site where you're hosting your event or where voting is taking place. So signage is very important, and it should encompass the cross-disability community. And when I say the cross-disability community, I'm talking about individuals that mobility, such as myself, individuals that are blind, that are hard of hearing, senior citizens. That is the cross-disability community. And so your signage should reflect the cross-disability community at your site selection. The next bullet and best accessibility tip would be accessible parking. You want to make sure that between 3 to 7 spaces that should be assigned for accessibility parking, and within the 3 and 7 spaces to the minimum, that you should have about between 3 and 4 to be a van accessible, because you have individuals who drive with their wheelchair, and they need to be able to have full access to be able to get out of their vehicle properly without dinging another vehicle, without messing up their vehicle, to be able to make sure that they're able to fully access the curb cut. Because if you have a curb cut here, but you don't have the spaces big enough for an accessible van, then it's null and void. It's not active, it's not effective, it's not a good best practice. So make sure that you have designated at least 3 to 4 spaces for an accessible van, especially since members of the cross-disability community are beginning to drive and be a little bit more self-sufficient in that regard. So make sure that you have those spaces available, or a designated drop-off for those who use public transportation, such as the paratransit system. And the paratransit system consists of, the buses or taxis or ride shares that have accessible vans. So make sure that the designated drop-off spot is right there where the curb cut is, and kind of close to where the accessible parking is located. I did just briefly speak about ramps and curb cuts. These are access to sidewalks and entrances. But when we think about this is also good, again, when you're talking about women that are pregnant or they have their young child with them. This is also accessible for them as well, especially individuals that are disabled and pregnant. So make sure that you have ramps and curb cuts that are accessible to the sidewalk and that are accessible to your site. Also, make sure that you have the remote control disability door opener, because that is easier for individuals such as myself and several others who may not always have the strength all the time to open the door. And again, this is about making it accessible. Accessibility stands for access. The derivative of accessibility is access. We want to make sure that it is accessible, access for everybody. So remote control disability door opener should be one of your best practices for your site selection. Make sure at your site selection that your aisle access is approximately 33 to 36 inches for individuals that are in wheelchairs, individuals that use a walker, individuals who use a scooter. I use a travel scooter from time to time when I am traveling, when I'm at conferences, because the walking may be too far and I need to be able to bring maybe I may walk a little bit and carry my scooter with me, or maybe I may be in my scooter. You want to make sure that you have enough space, not just for myself, but for others that are also there as well. So make sure that your aisle access is between 33 to 36 inches. It may seem like that's big, but it really isn't. And it gives everybody enough space and enough access. Again, enough access for everyone. The next accessibility tip that you should definitely consider is the accessible restrooms. Make sure again that there's a remote control disability door opener. For someone such as myself, I tend to hold it a lot. So when I need to get to that bathroom, I need to get to that bathroom immediately. And so you want to make sure, again, to access the restroom, make sure that disability door opener is there. Make sure that there are grab bars near the toilet stalls so that you are able to, if you need that extra additional support, to be able to grab to that bar by the toilet stall for that assistance. That is definitely critical for individuals with disabilities. So just some more additional basic accessibility best practices tip for your site selection and for voting day. Make sure that you always have an American Sign Language interpreter, or have CART, which is Communication Access Real-Time Translation. And that provides basically for whatever is being spoken about, whatever text, for it to be shown on your monitor or on your screen. And so CART is definitely very important for individuals that are blind, individuals that are hard of hearing. That is very good, a very basic tip, or even for individuals who may have missed something because maybe they were so busy, helping out or doing something, and they missed something. They missed something that was very important. CART is very, very important, very critical. And then you want to make sure that there's American Sign Language interpreter at your event. Just a few more basic accessibility tips for you. Just make sure that all of your material come in a variety of formats. All of us see differently. I wear glasses. Now, granted, there's some lovely fancy glasses to match my style, my look, and my outfit, but also I wear glasses because I need to be able to see. I cannot see long distance. And so I figured if I'm going to wear some glasses, they're going to be some nice fashionable glasses. So having said that, you want to make sure everyone's vision is different. Everyone's way of communicating and receiving the information is different. So you want to make sure that you have your material in Braille. That is for individuals that are blind. You want to make sure that you have it in large print. Sometimes I like large print just for the fact of having it large. It just all depends on you and depends on that person, that person's need. You want to make sure that it is in plain text. Make sure that it's plain. Make sure that everything that you're communicating, all of your best practices and tips are in plain text. Then you want to make sure that you have audio description. This is basically when you have a one-on-one description that is basically provided by someone who sits with a person that is blind and has asked for voice description. This is basically a rule of thumb, and it always should be provided for an image description here. And then lastly, I just think this is something always to have, because you never know, sometimes depending on the weather, depending on how your body is feeling, maybe, something may be going on, or, you may need some aspirin. You forgot to get some aspirin, or just depending on whatever may be happening with you. You should always consider having some type of medical staff on site, because you just never know what may take place, what may happen, again, depending on the weather, depending on how you're feeling. Everything, just consider all of those factors. And so you want to make sure that you have someone on staff, on site, a medical staff on site there at your site selection or at your site. So the last couple of slides are just a depiction of some signage, of what signage could look like. and then just a representation of individuals from the cross-disability community. And so this is just, again, just some examples of what signage will look like at your site or at your event to make sure that everyone is included, including people with disabilities. Lastly, this is just some more of some different signage, different reflections of my lovely community, the cross-disability community, what it looks like when we are voting, what it looks like as you're waiting in line to vote, as you see someone is just about to cast their vote. And so this concludes my presentation. I hope these best practices are something that you can take with you as you are getting prepared for National Voter Registration Day and beyond. These are just some basic tips that can be used for every event that you are having or that you are hosting. And so I hope this was very helpful to you, and I thank you for your time and attention. Back to you, Alan.
Ms. Wiley, phenomenal presentation. Thank you for that. Thank you for your advocacy and your work. Very much appreciated. And I hope that inspires many of you to participate and care about us in the disabled community. Next up, I would like to present another phenomenal presenter, great pillar in the community, Mr. Julio Rivera. He is the National Deputy Director of Civic Engagement at NALEO Educational Fund. In that role, he supports the organization's work on voter education, election protection, misinformation and disinformation, the census, and naturalization. He designs and leads campaigns through NALEO's Educational Fund priority regions to inform Latinos about elections and ensuring their voices are heard. Julio also oversaw NALEO's Educational Fund efforts in the Northeast to secure a complete count of the Latino community during the 2020 census. With everyone here, with a warm welcome, let's introduce Mr. Julio Rivera.
Hi, Alan. Thank you so much. Thank you to NVRD for inviting us. And Monica, thank you so much for that great information. It's a lot of tips and practices for us to also work into our voter registration efforts. So everyone, my name is Julio Rivera. I'm our National Deputy Director for Civic Engagement and NALEO Educational Fund. A little bit about NALEO Educational Fund, if you don't know already, we're the nation's leading 501c3 nonprofit organization that facilitates full Latino participation in the American political process, from citizenship to public service. And so what that looks like in practice is everything from getting folks to start that citizenship and that naturalization process, working with lawful permanent residents, getting them to become full-fledged citizens, getting them to become registered voters and active voters, and to the ultimate step of being an elected official, working with them to build up their tools and resources as well to do their jobs more effectively. NALEO has been proud to be part of NVRD since 2012, and we've been able to do a lot of great work getting folks registered in the last more than 10 years. So some basic tips for folks to keep in mind as they are preparing their voter registration efforts. We want to keep this broad. Our organization focuses, of course, on the Latino community, but I know your organizations probably serve a wide range of communities throughout the country. So with that in mind, some key things to know. First, just know your community, know who you are targeting, know where you are working and who you're working with. Is your a priority community? Are they a BIPOC community? Is it youth? Are they students? Are they new Americans? Keep that in mind because that will help not only where you are doing your work, where you're going to be targeting, what types of locations and events you're working in, but it will also inform the type of outreach, the communications, the messaging that you'll be utilizing. So just as important there is keeping that in mind, the in-language materials, volunteers, and staff. I can't stress this enough, especially for our Latino community. We know that a lot of folks need that in-language support, and it's extremely valuable to have a volunteer or a staff member that's able to communicate effectively with a potential registrant. And I want to also just highlight that this may be even more important in places that are not covered by the Voting Rights Act, Section 203. So there are locations throughout the country where municipalities, jurisdictions, they're not required to provide in-language materials, right? So that voter registration card doesn't necessarily have to be provided in Spanish, for example. So I think having CBOs produce their own materials, being able to speak the language it's even more important in locations like that. Identify some popular locations, know places where you know your community will be at. I'm based here in New York City. I know a very popular place to go to is really busy train stations, especially in big Latino communities. Sometimes just posting out there, you'll be able to talk to folks throughout the day. And NALEO Educational Fund, we've also partnered with colleges, community centers. We've been hosted at community events throughout the country. And these have been great places where we can speak to folks, catch them where they won't necessarily come out. If you're holding just a standalone voter registration drive, that may not get folks to come out, but they may be already heading to a street fair or a farmer's market. So those are great places to target. Always, if you can, bring some swag. That's a great conversation starter. Folks may not be super attracted to a voter registration card, but they may be really interested in your pair of sunglasses that you're handing out, or your stickers. So I know National Voter Registration Day does a great job of providing swag. If you haven't received that already, I'm sure you will in the next coming weeks. So take that with you. That's, again, a great way to attract folks to you, and just be that bit of an icebreaker. Do you have other services that you can provide? For our organization, something that we've come into what we've encountered a lot in the past is we have a lot of mixed status families that we work with, right? We may have someone in the family that is a US citizen, that they is eligible to be registered to vote, but maybe other folks in their family are not. Maybe they're barely starting that process of becoming a citizen. So one thing that we've done is, if we can't really finish the conversation and provide you the service in getting you registered to vote, can we refer you to our naturalization program or other services that your organization may be able to provide? So that's just another way to make sure that your programming is inclusive. Not everybody will be able to get registered to vote, but there are maybe other ways that you could provide services to this person that you're speaking to. And lastly, just make it fun. Voter registration can be a fun thing. We've held things like music, art elements, visuals, any way that you can think to just mix it up, make it more interesting, make it an inviting table or booth or whatever it is that you're hosting. Try to think creatively and include that into your voter registration drive. So equally as important, I would say, beyond just knowing your community, knowing how to best communicate with them, is knowing the rules and the regulations. This will be very important to your 501c3 or other CBO to make sure that you're in line with the proper procedures and you're following the laws and the rules. One thing to know is that over the last few years, we have seen some newly restrictive voter registration laws. Alan spoke a little bit about this, but it's important to be up to date on what those are. In some states we've seen, like in Texas, you must be deputized to be able to do voter registration work. So you need to work with your election administrator to be cleared to do that. We've seen some new laws that are asking folks to be US citizens to be able to conduct voter registration work. So it's something important to keep in mind. A good way to know is to work with your local electional administrators. Make sure that you are following the rules as best as possible. So again, make sure that your volunteers and your staff, they're qualified and that they are trained, that they know the information that they should be collecting, and that they are able to guide the voter that is registering in filling out the form. Some ways that you may want to make sure that you're within that training, within that qualifications, making sure that your staff and volunteers are ready. Something that they'll also want to do is make sure that they are properly informing the person that is registering. They may have questions about the form, what is necessary, what is required, what is not. And also the follow-up. Sometimes we've gotten questions from folks that have been registered by us that they never received their voter confirmation card or their registration confirmation card. So have some knowledge of what voters should expect to see as any sort of follow-up. Should they be getting some sort of communication? Will they be getting some sort of postcard in the mail as a follow-up? Will you be following up with them? So that's just another piece to keep in mind. Again, I mentioned it already. There are some rules around handling the registration, the registrant's information, right? Sometimes folks will include social security numbers, their personal, other personal identification information. There are usually some rules on the types of information that you can keep, how you can store it, how long you can store it. So those are just some other things that you should keep in mind. Pre-registration for youth. Not every state has this, but in some states, like Florida, like in California, folks that are 16, 17 years old, they can actually pre-register to vote. So this is another great option. This opens up places like high schools where you can work with students to get them pre-registered. They won't be able to vote until they turn 18, but as soon as they turn 18, they'll have that ability to cast a ballot. And we all got to do this in collaboration with others. No one person stands alone. We're all a team here and we all collaborate in coalitions. So what other partners can you identify at your local level to help you? I've already mentioned election administrators. These are great partners. They're the folks that are responsible for getting these voter registration cards in, processing them. So they can give you the forms themselves. They can give you best practices, the best way to turn these forms in, get you up to date on the regulations. And a lot of times they're more than happy to come with you to your voter registration event. So they can stand alongside you, provide the information that is necessary to the registrant, and also help you with the registration process. Other civic engagement organizations, again, in coalitions, NALEO Educational Fund, this is our bread and butter. We have plenty of partner organizations that focus on civic engagement and voter engagement efforts. Pulling together our resources, we've been able to cover more ground, get into more neighborhoods, get more people registered. But outside of that, other community-based organizations. Sometimes you have a church or a school group or some other community organization that doesn't do this day in and day out, and maybe would look to an organization like ours for some of that expertise to come in. So that's another great partnership that you can build up. Organizations that don't do this every day, but look towards others in the civic engagement space for their expertise. And lastly, just event organizers or community fairs, farmers markets. We see these everywhere in your community. I'm sure you can think of a few. Strike up a conversation with the organizers. Is this someplace that they would be open to giving you a booth for you to do some voter registration work? So I'll just leave it with some of our efforts this year. So as I mentioned, NALEO Educational Fund has been doing this, partnering with NVRD for the last more than 10 years. This year, we're very excited to be able to have a more earnest effort in the return of our in-person voter registration events. You can see our Texas team here actually working with the election administrators in Harris County to do a voter registration event. So we'll continue to do that. We're planning on doing that through all of our regional teams. And one thing that I forgot to mention is our organization does have regional civic engagement teams. So we have one based here in New York, one in Charlotte, in Central Florida, in Houston, and in Los Angeles area in California. So all of those teams, you may see them at some point out in the community doing some of these voter registration events. Secondly is our NVRD partner recruitment. So just like Alan shared at the beginning with the QR code, we also help in the recruitment of community partners to do this work. Third, our social and traditional media promotion. We've done this in the past, doing interviews or promotion with our partners in the media like Telemundo or Univision, as well as through social media, promoting it on places like Meta or on Twitter, or X as it's called now. As always, we have the availability of our 888 Bay Vota hotline. This is a great resource for any community member that has a question about getting registered to vote, how they can register, can they do it online? Any questions, confusion, it's a bilingual hotline that's available year round, and of course on NVRD. So feel free to call that hotline or share it as a resource to your community members. And lastly, just a note, Defienda la Verdad. We've seen over the last few years more and more disinformation and misinformation, more contention when it comes to issues like voter engagement and voter registration efforts. So We have an effort, a campaign to counter and work against disinformation and misinformation. We'll continue to keep an eye on this through our social media monitoring program through this campaign known as the Fin de la Verdad. So if you're interested in that, I'm happy to get in contact with you and talk more about the Fin de la Verdad. But with that, I'll turn it back over to you, Alan.
Julio, thank you again, and I appreciate all the work that you've done and sharing the resources and access for everyone on this call.